Welcome to a new episode of InFocus with Ejaz. Haider. This program is supported by the Center for Security Strategy and Policy Research. CESPR is an autonomous policy research center housed in the University of Lahore, and it tackles issues that impact contemporary security and strategic developments. This episode is about Pakistan Air Force. Let me begin with something interesting. And this is actually, I'm reading up from an article that was written, as I'll tell you, by an former Indian Army officer. So whatever I'm going to read now is actually an excerpt from that article. And so I quote, "A popular tale, apocryphal but grounded in truth, recounts an Air Force student at the National Defense College asking the librarian where he could find a book on the war history of the Indian Air Force. Without looking up, the librarian responded, 'In the fiction section, sir.' As the IEF kicks off another round of myth-making, it is worth remembering how little there was to celebrate in those September days when the underdog, PAF, got the better of the IEF in raid after raid, dogfight after dogfight. This comes not from the fevered imagination of Pakistani jingoists, but from the official Indian history of the 1965 war, which was endorsed on 31st December 1992 by then Defense Secretary N.N. Vora. Yet, it was held back and remains classified even today. As I said earlier, these are excerpts from an article by a former Indian cavalry officer, Colonel Ejaz Shukla. Since many of our Indian viewers, I thank them for watching the program even when they leave comments that are not particularly decent, since they show an unfortunate tendency to berate facts and create fictions, we'll put the link to the article below. The point to read out from Colonel Shukla's article is to discuss, as I said earlier, a book about Pakistan Air Force. It's an opportune moment because the May 6-10 war has once again shown PF to be a professional meritorious service. Eagles of Destiny, History of the Royal Pakistan Air Force and Pakistan Air Force 1947-71, that's the book we'll discuss, has been written by Usman Shabbir and Yawar Mazhar. Mr. Shabbir is an aviation and defense enthusiast who's been researching the history of the PAF for over 25 years. By training and profession, he's an engineer and focuses on IT infrastructure and services. Mr. Mazhar has worked in the financial sector, but like his co-author, has a keen interest in military aviation and especially Pakistan Air Force. It is also my great pleasure, personal pleasure, to have Air Marshal Aamir Masood for this discussion. Air Masood, commissioned in the Pakistan Air Force as a fighter pilot in 1988, served for over 35 years. He rose to the senior-most rank and retired as the coveted Deputy Chief of the Air Staff Air Defense. As DCAS AD, he was responsible for a number of very important tasks. He is also an avid polo player and remained president of PAF's Polo Association until his retirement. So I'm really grateful to all my panelists. Here's the book. We are going to put some of the excerpts when this program is aired. It's very interesting. I was kind of scanning through it. I have to say one thing. The next edition must have an index, because I was trying to look for things. Index helps a lot. In the acknowledgements, the authors say that Air Commodore MZ Masood, he conducted a number of interviews with veterans of PF as part of his project on PF history, and so they obviously, those interviews are very helpful in the compilation of facts for this book. They also conducted some interviews with well-known PF figures like former chiefs of Air Marshals McDonald, Zafar Chaudhry, and Asghar Khan. But the interesting thing is, and I think that's the peg for this program, and let me just read it out from here. The book explains how PF a token force on its creation on 15th August 1947, with Pakistan having a status of a dominion called the Royal Pakistan Air Force, transformed into a modern and effective air force within the first 2 decades of its existence. The basic argument is that no one factor, whether equipment, numbers, training, or leadership, explains PF's success in the conflicts it faced. Instead, the critical point is that PF came together as a well-knit organization addressing significant challenges it faced. The coming together as an organization meant that its leadership understood the nature of air power, and the rank and file of the force understood their specific roles and were trained and resourced to undertake those roles. So the thing is that let's begin with that, because I think if you recall, after this 4-day war, there's been a lot of commentary about J-10Cs and PL-15s and, Rafales and the rest of it. It's almost like, you blindfold men and ask them to touch an elephant, and, everyone describes the elephant in terms of the part that he has actually touched. That doesn't really describe the elephant in its totality. So let's begin there, because I think this is one of the central points of this book that keeps recurring as you go through the history of RPF and then PF, and then, of course, beyond chapter 6, you got the 65 war and then the 71 war. I would, of course, Aamir Masood is here to, he's the only one who's actually sat in a cockpit, flown these fast fighter jets. We'll get to him. But I want to first get the view of the two authors, starting with Mr. Shabbir, and then Mr. Mazhar, and then we'll get to Aamir Masood. Mr. Shabbir.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on this pretty interesting podcast. Happy to be here. This project basically started 20 odd years ago. At that time, just to give you a brief intro, me and Yawar, we used to interact on a aviation forum. And at that time, we did quite a bit of research. We wrote some articles. We had the data. And when the opportunity arose in the COVID time to sort of do a book on PAF, we decided to sort of avail that. So this project is basically based on data collected over the past 25 years. The thing is, many people, they just focus purely on the armament. They focus on the aircraft, how fancy they are, what they can do or cannot. Very few focus on the journey of the organization itself, and that's what we wanted to sort of document and sort of inform the readers about. If you look at the budget, the money over the years, if you look towards our neighbor, they always have had a greater budget. They also actually had access to the Americans as well, just like we did after independence. But PF sort of came together in a sense that it availed those opportunities that were presented to it over the years. And we just tried to sort of walk through that process in the book and try to sort of document it as best as we could, and sort of tell it as best as we could. So this is just basically a snapshot of history, so to speak.
No, I think that's a very interesting and very important point. And one other point which kind of relates to what I read out earlier from your book about PF realizing quite early that it would have to fight outnumbered, and that the sum of its parts would inevitably need to be more than the whole. And I think that is one of the points that I want to take to Mr. Mazhar, because that's something that we see evolving over many decades, even as the platforms have changed, the systems have changed, there's more integration, what we call the Internet of Military Things and the rest of it. And of course, the doctrinal changes and the rest of it, but that particular point seems to have constantly evolved. consistently over decades.
So, thank you, Ejaz, first for having us here. Um, as you said, look, if I have to summarize PF's history in one sentence, I would say it is about the development of institutional knowledge. And what PAF has done very well is operationalized what it means to be an air power or what it means to be an air force quite well. Uh, Inheritance of both Pakistan Air Force, or originally the Royal Pakistan Air Force, and the Indian Air Force was the RAF.
Yeah,
And one very important uh, fundamental point that both air forces inherited was that air has a mission of its own. It has to be a larger part of the larger war objectives, but an air force has a mission of its own, independent of what an army would do or what the navy would do. So it's not just flying artillery, which was the Soviet concept. And what PF has done, that was the original inheritance that we got from the RAF, from the Western Allied Air Force doctrine at the time. And what PF has managed to do very well is operationalize that concept. And I think the most important part where it started, a few factors, few points I would like to highlight. One is the major transformation happened under Air Marshal Asghar Khan, due as the U.S. aid program in 1950s, late mid 1950s started, and the thing that Air Marshal Asghar Khan did along with his team was that they just did not focus on the acquisition of new equipment that was coming through the US aid. They wholeheartedly started adopting new processes and an organization which was needed to make the most effective use of that equipment. One. And second, institutions within the Air Force were created which could continue to build up on that skill set or that technical knowledge. Like, for example, the Fighter Leader School, which later became Combat Commander School, and then Air Power Center of Excellence, which I think Air Marshal Aamir Masood uh, actually was on at the helm when it became ACE. The Air Force Staff College, which is now the Air War College, flight safety, everything, even the way policies and procedures were maintained and issued to units was changed. And what that did, along with that, what also happened was a change in organization structure from to a competence-based organization structure. What I mean is that there was a separate operations branch, a separate maintenance branch, and a separate air defense branch, for example. And that allowed accumulation of best standard of practice. So these were the major key points that happened during the mid 50s to up to 1965, we can say, which have allowed PAF to continue to outperform an enemy which or adversary which is has much more resources. So that's the crux of the book, and that is what we need to understand.
one of the points that you make with reference to Air Vice Marshal, actually, that he did not immediately get down to expanding the Royal Pakistan Air Force, but focused on training and, cadet programs, and essentially to get, like, in terms of human resource, high merit human resource. I need to sort of pull back my chair and show you something which a friend of mine
Yes.
presented to me. He's a former Pakistan Air Force officer, Daniel Masoom. His father, Squadron Leader Masoom, was also a PF fighter pilot, and So this is essentially a model of MM Alam's saber,
Yeah.
and yeah, it has the kills here, and it also has the tail number. You have the tail numbers in your book. So
Yes.
it has the tail number also, and it has and it's one of my cherished possessions. I am really grateful to Daniel for having presented this to me. Um, but let me get to the fighter pilot on this panel, Air Marshal Masood. So, Air Marshal Masood, give us a sense of, I mean, you and I were at some days ago privately discussing this, but give us a sense of this, the evolution of this institution and how this institution has retained its meritocracy and its high training levels, its induction of top-notch human resource.
Thank you very much, Ejaz bhai. And yesterday I was reading a book on leadership by Henry Kissinger, and it writes something, and I would just like to quote that before I move on further. It says that in 1953, American exchange student asked Churchill how one might prepare to meet the challenges of leadership. Study history. Study history was Churchill's emphatic reply. In history lie all the secrets of statecraft. And Churchill was himself a prodigious student and a writer of history who well understood the continuum within which he was working. So I think, I mean, history is definitely very, very essential. But it's not all I mean, I would say not sufficient enough, because another important aspect is that the leaders have to learn lessons and they have to adapt according to the situations which emerge. And that is what I think have been one of the strengths of Pakistan Air Force, that not only that they have learned from the history, but the leaders over a period of so many decades have learned to adapt to the changing environments, changing technology, and changing doctrine, which on the other side, the Indians have not done very efficiently. First of all, I would like to, congratulate both the authors, because I was really impressed to read this book. Not only that, it's well researched, well written. Uh, I think it has few lessons, operational as well as strategic, which only I would say an air-minded person would have written or would have come, with those conclusions. Uh, and I personally think coming it from a civilian, people who have not had an experience of flying at all, uh, shows what sort of passion they have, what sort of acquaintance and what sort of love they have for Pakistan Air Force and of course for the aviation itself. So very rightly pointed out by both the authors the lessons which they have mentioned in the book also. So, I mean, I would say that these three factors were very important uh, at the birth of Pakistan, Royal Pakistan Air Force, and subsequently the standards which we are maintaining today. We owe a lot to our founding fathers. The first decade of the Britishers was a sort of consolidation, I would say, decade. They didn't take a true ownership of Royal Pakistan Air Force, and that is the reason that we were not able to have standardization and also operational readiness, uh, which could have been much better in the first 10 years of birth of Pakistan, Royal Pakistan Air Force. Similarly, selecting an aircraft like Attacker uh, above other options which were available as the first jet aircraft. Attacker wasn't very agile aircraft, wasn't very maneuverable aircraft, uh, and that was the reason that these British air chiefs thought that we should always have a weapon system which was from Royal Air Force, and they were getting the money out of that. So I would say that the start of Pakistan Air Force took place in the last year of the last Royal Air Chief, Royal Pakistan Air Force Chief McDonnell. Uh, and that was the time when the selection was supposed to be made between F-86 or any of the British systems, because 3 years before that, the American assistance have started. And this is very important for us all to remember. And I've been saying it in many of the previous interviews before I read this book also, knowing the history, and I've written a book, Shabazz, which also I will mention subsequently, that what all was there and how I did the research by interviewing all the live air chiefs. American training, American weapon system, American documentation, American maintenance procedures were very, I would say, helpful in giving Pakistan Air Force the start which it deserved and where we stand today. The first revolutionary change in Pakistan Air Force came once we inducted F-86s, because Asghar Khan was bent upon, having this aircraft, and the American assistance was coming. Noor Khan Saab also wanted this, and the whole team of Asghar Khan, Aamir Masood Saab, and subsequently, Jamal Saab, they all wanted that F-86s should be inducted in Pakistan. And once they were inducted, and they saw the manuals and the procedures and the operational, combat yo-yos which they have mentioned, and air combat tactics, they were never practiced in Pakistan Air Force before that. So that was a change which actually revolutionized our flying as well as maintenance procedures. And there was, no dearth of the money and the equipment which was coming from America, and the training which our officers received from there. That was the reason that we were able to have a very strong foundation. Second thing was the leadership. Asghar Khan Saab, I would say that those 8 years of Asghar Khan Saab were the most important years for Pakistan Air Force. This is always there, whenever the foundations are strong, the building is going to be very strong and institutions are going to be strong. We weren't lucky as Pakistan to have very strong foundation because Quaid-e-Azam died early. But Asghar Khan Saab got an opportunity to serve for 8 years as air chief, one of the youngest air chief in the world, very dynamic, very strong morally, character-wise, a powerful person, a courageous commander, and a person who always believed in bold decision-making. He was the one who gave a very good start to Pakistan Air Force. Every war plan which was followed in 65 war was actually made during the time of Asghar Khan Saab. And his team was again very strong. Who were the members of the team? If you see, Miti Masood Saab, MZ Masood, a very, very strong person, again, a dynamic commander, upright person. Jamal Saab, known for his character and uprightness, no nonsense sort of thing, till even once he was air chief. Miti Masood Saab, you remember, was a person who actually refused military action in Bangladesh. He was destined to be the air chief, but an unsung hero actually, who also commanded Sargodha base in 65 war. And he was the one who was one of the very, favorite, I would say, persons of Asghar Khan Saab, and was there in institutionalizing many things. Fighter Leader School, it was Miti Masood Saab who was the commander, the first commander of Fighter Leader School. And then there were Jamal Khan Saab and one more, I'm not... Waqar Azim Saab. So they, all three were very strong professionally, and they gave the start of Fighter Leader School. And they were also trained abroad in these weapon school in UK as well as in the United States. So this institution of Fighter Leader School, as mentioned, subsequently became Combat Commander School, which was the Top Gun School of Pakistan Air Force. And today it is the Air Power Center of Excellence, which not only trains its own, of course, there are certain texts which are for the local fighter pilots and mid-level leadership. And there are a few which are for the international players also who come in and have exercises with us. So now this institution has actually produced few of the finest fighter pilots and have never compromised on standards, which I would say is much more than what we face whenever we are facing IAF, Indian Air Force, uh, we are much more comfortable than what we practice in combat commander school or at Air Power Center of Excellence. So, as it is said that I mean, you fight like you train. So
Yeah.
the training is so tough that we were even once we were not having BVR missiles, and Indian Air Force used to have BVR. So we were told how to, shoot down Indian BVR aircraft with infrared missiles, short range missiles, and do it outnumbered. I mean, that was something which was a big challenge, and we used to practice that. We practiced that realistically in Kargil War. We practiced that in Op Sentinel, which was the situation after the Parliament attack, and both the forces were eyeball to eyeball, and it was imminent. The war was imminent. So we were given a very realistic training at that time also. So institutional strength, as I mentioned, has been very important, has always been taken very seriously by Pakistan Air Force. Leadership, institution, and third thing, the American training and American doctrine of employing Air Force independently.
That's
These three things have been the founding things, because Ejaz bhai, the first thing is, which is very important, is that Air Force is the only force which can reach the heart of the enemy. And to do that, it needs to have control of air. And to have control of air, it's very important that you have the liberty to employ yourself. Your tactical and operational level leaders have the liberty to do and take actions according to their situational awareness and their sound judgment.
no, that's a great explication. There's one point that I want to take to Mrs. Shabbir and Mazhar, because they mentioned this in the book also. This kind of links up with this whole idea of the US training and manuals and flying discipline and all that. Uh, my own experience of having gone to all boys and generally gone through life is that you know you'll always have a what we call in Punjabi a talanga, who might not be very disciplined, but has that kind of panache, which then ultimately gets him or her to do certain things which perhaps the more disciplined might not be able to do. But this kind of links up with what they've written in the book with reference to Air Marshal Zafar Chaudhry and also AVM Khyber Khan, in terms of flying discipline, uh, a kind of childish and juvenile behavior. The pilot retracting the undercarriage very quickly after takeoff, and sortie beat up and the rest of it. But it seems to me that you have a certain kind of personality, and then you tame it through training and discipline, but training and discipline in a way that does not really beat down that panache. And I think that is something which, uh, in all types of soldiering, I think is very important, where you have a combination, and this is one of the most difficult combinations to have, the combination of understanding the drills, the SOPs, the discipline, and also retaining the initiative. So I want, starting with Mr. Shabir, that it seems to me that Pakistan Air Force has somehow uh, got this kind of magic combination. So, maybe because the force got lucky and got all these great upright officers. I don't know how it happened, but give me your
It's
sense of what it is.
right after independence, we lacked manpower. At that time, we availed the opportunity to send pilots to be trained in the US, 1948, 49. There was a private school run by Pevo Howard, which was a very famous aerobatic pilot. So he set up this school, and we sent around 30 odd. Um, and that we were sort of paying for it, right? At that time, we weren't getting any aid or any money or anything. We sort of had to dole out for that. That training stopped in 1953, 54, when the American assistance started, and they started offering the same training in their institutes. But you're absolutely right that at independence, the mindset was still from the Second World War, where boys are going to be boys. And I remember actually having a discussion with late Sajad Haider, and
Oh,
he mentioned something that at that time we used to basically race, and whoever made it first to the cockpit and in the air would be the leader. so so they had sort of that attitude. But once the American uh, processes started flowing down to PAF, and the leadership at that time uh, sort of embraced that wholeheartedly. Uh, and they wanted to make sure that the accident rates, the attrition rate, has to go down. I remember in the start after the independence, our attrition rate was like something like 26 per 10,000, which was basically uh, too high.
yeah.
So when the Americans came on board, and we were building the Air Force up, of course, there were a lot of new sort of people graduating and coming on the fighter stream, and still we were losing quite a few aircraft, but not as much as we were right after independence. And it actually took quite a bit of enforcement to drill down that flight safety culture. We have had a lot of examples. I don't think we have noted them down in the book, uh, but there is some famous ones that come to Alam and even Noor Khan, that were like very sort of these cowboys in the air. But after like the transformation on the other side, they were also very much into the flight safety culture and wanted to make sure that people do things right, and that we don't lose any more aircraft or life in these careless flying. So it took a lot of discipline and quite a few years to sort of have that in place.
You want to add something to that, Yawar Mazhar?
Yes. So I would like to explain this in terms of what we talked about earlier, institutional knowledge. And it was mentioned, we also briefly discussed Supermarine Attacker, which was the first jet aircraft of Royal Pakistan Air Force, and the F-86 Sabre. So if you look at the Supermarine Attacker, as I was researching the book, I was able to access what is called the pilot's notes of a supermarine attacker, and it's a 70-page document. So if we buy a car today, the instruction manual of an automobile is probably more comprehensive than that pilot notes. And when you go to the F-86 Sabre system, it's called the Dash 1. That is a very well structured 400, 500-page document. Just to give you an example, in the attacker manual, when they talk about spinning, it's just 3 lines. Spinning is prohibited, normal recovery procedure would apply, right? And when you look at the F-86-1, it is a 6 or 8 page section which would explain step by step why a spin happens, what happens in what configuration, what a pilot is supposed to do, how the horizon would look, what would the cockpit instruments say. So the thing is that the pilots got much better educated, much better trained. The whole operational conversion process of a pilot who was flying a Fury or a Tempest, which is a propeller driven aircraft, to the first jet aircraft attacker was a single day. The pilot would show up at the base, they would say, "Here's the pilot notes, read it, tell us if you have any questions." At the end of the day, they will ask, "Any questions?" "No, sir." They will walk him to the cockpit, show the instruments, and off he goes. He's a converted jet pilot now. And F-86 Sabre was a completely different thing. You see, there was a structured course which, like I said, aided by with an academic phase, aided by educational aids like the Dash 1 that I referred to, which means that the people became much better prepared. I don't recall if that incident is mentioned in the book or not, but there's an incident of AVM Khyber Khan, right? He was officer commanding of the first fighter conversion unit, which was flying Tempest. And there was a young pilot officer named MM Alam there. And one day Alam came back. His aircraft was, he was trying to do low flying, very low flying, and he had ended up hitting some trees or bushes, and the aircraft was very badly damaged, right? He but managed to land the aircraft. And what was the response from those? It's very interesting. He said if the guy is so excited he wants to kill him, let him kill himself, but gave him as a punishment gardening duties. So it was almost like you are a naughty schoolboy and you are punished by your school teacher, something like that, right? Write this thing 100 times on the board. Fast forward 5 or 10 years, same Khyber Khan and Alam. There's a story by Khyber Khan. Haider Khan was visiting Moripur, Alam was there, and as he was going towards his meeting, he noticed Alam sitting in a room with a number of manuals sitting there and, completely engrossed in them. And he said, I walked up to him and I said, Alam, what are you trying to do? What are you doing? Sir, I am calculating that if the enemy aircraft is pulling 60-degree bank on 5G, then where do I need to place my gun sight Piper? That's the cultural shift that happened. So they still did very aggressive flying, but that aggressive flying was much more structured. And that is what we mean by when we say, or when I said that, it's about development of institutional knowledge, setting up of. So the fighter leader school, there are a number of quotes in the book which talk about young pilots not really knowing what they are supposed to do and, what's the purpose of a fighter squadron. And then you go through the fighter leader school, you get a much better structured sense of what aggressive fighter flying is, how can you do it safely and still meet your mission objectives. So
So
that
this is,
change.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we headed towards the closure of the program also, but this whole idea of the institutional knowledge is also, and I'm saying this as a social scientist. This is both important, but it also has a downside. And the downside is that you get into what is known as path dependence. You have the institutional memory. So what it means is that, and this is something that I want to ask A.M. Masood, that how does, and it requires a very, very fine balance, once again, as I said earlier, between discipline and initiative. This also requires a very fine balance that you retain the institutional edifice, but at the same time, you retain the ability to understand what is changing and not just remain stuck in the grooves, in the institutional grooves. That is, again, a very big challenge that organizations face. And, it's part of organization theory. So, A. Masood, how has the Pakistan Air Force retained the institutional integrity and at the same time not lose the ability or the capacity to understand that with things evolving, the institution itself has to evolve?
So that's very important, actually. That's what I said in adaptation also, that, how we kept on adapting to the changing environments, changing technology, changing tactics, techniques, and procedures. And this is, this was very important for the reason that if you see in the history also, because of the aid program from America also, we always had few of the finest jets or few of the latest jets which even the Americans were flying in our initial days. We got F-86s, which were new at that time. We got F-104s, which were again the something very state of art and one of the finest fighters at that time. Even, Americans were skeptical that whether Pakistani pilots would be able to fly this machine or not. When Asghar Khan put his foot down and said, no, we will be taking F-104s and not F-100s. So he was the one who was the first one to get checked out in Pakistan once these fighters arrived. And subsequently, F-16s, again, few of the. So two very important periods, I would say, or the revolutionary periods in the history of Pakistan Air Force had been first time uh, in the with the induction of F-86s and F-104s, and along with that, the manuals and the maintenance procedures and the flight safety procedures and the quality assurance programs and the logistics which was automated. So this was the first time which we had, and we were much ahead of Indians, even with all the sanctions once we were going in 1971 war also. And the second period, which had been, after the once the Afghan war was there and we inducted F-16s, that was again a revolutionary period, and that totally changed the air combat, uh, you know, the concept which had been followed by Pakistan Air Force. And a very important thing was that once we were changing or we were evolving, we were evolving as an institution. We didn't evolve as a platform centric air force, we evolved as a system centric air force.
Correct.
And that was something which was very important, which is still having an impact. And I would say that we owe a lot again to the institutions which were very strong and which kept on giving us the latest tools, techniques and procedures, and also to the weapon systems which we got, which were always a few of the finest weapon system, and the leadership which had which never compromised on those standards, and which adapted according to the changing environments. And with less budget, with less resources, we were able to do more. So, as General Deptula says, and I've been quoting him many times, that if you are having a platform which is fifth generation, but your concept of operation is second generation, then you will end up fighting like a second generation air force, which Indians did actually in Pulwama also, and this time also. We have, I would just like to read one of the paragraphs which I wrote about Asad Khan Saab in my book, that he not only eliminated the British operational model from the Pakistan Air Force, but even more remarkably avoided the blind adoption of all United States Air Force practices as well, without first judging the efficacy of each to serve the doctrine and mission that he had set for the Pakistan Air Force. So this is very important. We have been doing American exercise. I myself have done with foreign air forces from last almost 15 years, and we have also done even before that with the U.S. Navy, Nimitz and Eisenhower against F-18s and F-14s. We have also flown to those aircrafts also, carriers also, and have done lots of mission with them. We exactly know that what are the tactics which are suitable for us and which goes with our environments where we have an enemy which is larger in size, more in numbers, and which is contiguous to our borders also.
Yeah.
Americans have been flying the tactics of large force packages for many years, because they go and they create air superiority and air dominance right from the start, and then they are facing air forces like Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, and where there's nothing.
Yeah.
This is what Indians have been initially following, luckily, the tactics of the Russians, which consider air force as an adjunct of army and navy, and which is never independent. That has been the case, and luckily we have been facing such air force. We faced them in Pulwama, and they never learned the lesson, and they did the same this time. Actually, they had been for a couple of years being trained by the American Air Force also, and had a few exercises with them also, and with Israel also. So they thought that these large force packages is a new way of attacking a smaller air force. But they never had this thing in mind that with contiguous borders and an air force which is Pakistan Air Force can see you even taking off from your bases. There will be no surprise. You will be exposing yourself, and the Shaheens who are watching you, who are ready, waiting for you, are going to attack you before you do anything with them. So
Yeah.
this offensive mindset was actually first employed by Asghar Khan Saab of preemption in 65 war, and that was followed by the Israelis in 67, where they eliminated 400 Arab jets in just
Yeah.
4 5 hours. Actually, if that would have worked well, and Asghar Khan should have been given the time to fight 65 war. That preemptive strike would have been really very debilitating for the enemy. It worked on only Pathankot. It didn't work on Halwara and Adampur because the element of surprise was over, and for the reasons which is mentioned in the book also, of serviceability of aircraft, of delays of decision making, which was just because that Noor Khan Saab has he was a very capable commander. There's no doubt about it. The most suitable commander for that. But he was out of Air Force for almost 7, 8 years, and he took some time in decision making. And that preemption and those preemptive strikes and the war plans were actually made by Rahim Khan Saab under the guidance of Asghar Khan Saab. So that preemption was because they wanted that an air force which is outnumbered has to strike first, has to create that balance in numbers before they go for normal strikes, and they start to do offensive counter air and defensive counter air missions. So this was actually the strategy of Asghar Khan Saab, which was subsequently replicated by the Israel Air Force as well.
I personally, one of the great things about this book is because there's a lot of literature already on 65. Lots of Western aviation experts have also written. But the portion about 71, I find very informative. One of the things about Air Marshal Rahim Khan, and I believe that this is right, that it was in this conflict that PF came into its own element, not only in terms of obviously facing a much larger air force, but also because of the political developments and the fact that some of the best human resource within the PF had to be sidelined and not allowed frontline duties. I think that's a great thing. By the way, one of my favorite air raids, which I think if we had the capacity to or the budget to make something like like they make Top Gun and the rest of it, one of the most daring raids I would think, not just in the history of Indo-Pak wars, but aviation itself, was the Klaikunda operation by Number 14 Squadron.
Yes.
Which is just absolutely remarkable. But just going towards closure, I don't want to get the take from the authors on whether they intend to now carry the history forward from 71 to now, or are they too busy with their banking jobs and their IT sector high-paying jobs?
This is this is a work of passion, so we will
Yeah,
always
I know.
make
I
time
know.
for
I
it.
mean, to be very honest, it comes across. It comes across.
Yeah,
You know,
we would.
I haven't had the pleasure of speaking with you before this program, but Yawar and I have been corresponding for a while now, so I understand perfectly when you talk
Yeah.
about passion.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can you can take that.
Yeah, Ejaz very much would like to, but it's also a question of opportunity. You see, there are many ideas in our mind. For example, one could do like over the May Air battle. There were comments from, I remember, our DCS ops saying that this air battle would be taught as a case study, right? Which is correct. But I think there's another case study in Pakistan Air Force, which is also very interesting as an aviation enthusiast. And to me, that's the JF-17 program. It has been a very well managed, very pragmatic fighter aircraft program. I follow military aviation. I read almost every day what's happening with in that area, but it is a very good, well managed program. So that was one area. Air Force today in the 21st century could be another area. It's a question of how much access do we get also, because this something that you can only understand once you talk to practitioners like Air Marshal Aamir Masood, and without that, your knowledge remains not very clear. It's a question of how much access we end up getting. But as Usman also mentioned and you guessed, it's about passion. So we probably hopefully end up doing something.
No, that will be great. Last word to Air Marshal Masood. This very important point. I just want you to, in terms of going forward, that it's not just a platform oriented approach, but it's a systems oriented approach. And so just give our viewers a sense of how the Pakistan Air Force has developed this, because of course there's a certain kind of evolution, but also that we have moved from the analog world to now the digital world, with cognitive systems and artificial intelligence and space and cyber and the rest of it. So is that the key to what the Pakistan Air Force has actually achieved in terms of integrating all these systems, whether they are aerial platforms, in terms of the fighter platforms, the support platforms, and the ground systems?
Exactly. So I mean, this this process doesn't take 2 years or 3 years to mature. It actually takes more than 15, 20 years, and that has been the continuity which has been maintained by the successive regimes, successive leadership, and this continuity has resulted in ensuring a system based approach and sensor shooter integration, network centricity, and common operating picture, sort of multi domain operations. And this is because of the fact that we today have a common operating picture as well as we have a common link. That common data link is something which is very important, link 17, which you have heard many times also, many people talking about that, many people writing about that. So this Link 17 journey has been equally impressive as has been the development of JF-17, for that matter, or our institutions like Combat Commander School. And these have been, this Link 17 was subsequently after the Link 16, which we got from F-16. We started to develop Link 17 so that we have our all platforms, even those which were conventional, like the Mirages, the oldest ones which we are flying, more than almost, I think, 50 years old. And they were also having that picture, which the latest of the J-10s was having in its cockpit. So that situational awareness is something which is known as the system-centric approach by every player who is in the combat zone, whether on ground or in the air. They have a single similar picture, and that is where you can take decisions from tactical level to the strategic level in a very prompt manner and more faster than your enemy, which actually in the tactical language it is known as the OODA loop:
Yeah,
observe, orientate, decide, and act, actually coined by John Boyd, Colonel John Boyd,
yeah,
which is very important in today's war fighting, where we are migrating towards hyper war.
yeah,
I would give credit to the leadership, the present leadership, for maturing the space program, the cyber program, and giving a lot of impetus to our command and control centers. These command and control centers are actually the hub of every activity. I have always said that it's like a weapon system, whether it is in the air or on the ground, because that is where the commanders and the leaders have to take decisions.
yeah.
Whosoever takes the decision first and is able to respond first is going to be the winner in any future conflict. And this is what we saw in this conflict also, that there were many ifs and buts, there were many lot of confusion on the Indian side, and that is the reason they were not able to employ their weapon system, which was much more advanced, I would say, much more battle tested than J-10, the Rafales, which I am saying. But they couldn't employ that efficiently because the commander's intent and the direction and the decision was not very clear. And in case of Pakistan Air Force, Alhamdulillah, that clarity was there, I would say speed of decision as well as speed of sensor shooter chain was visible, and multi-domain operations. This is something which is the prerequisite.
Correct.
Alhamdulillah, we were able to employ that, and we got the results.
Great. This also brings us to the end of this episode. I'll just say that, Pakistan does not want to have a war with India or any kind of conflict. It doesn't want to have wars with any state. But unfortunately, we kind of locked into this adversarial paradigm because of a right-wing Hindutva government in India. As a matter of fact, there's so much that we could do together if we had cooperative strategies. But if war is to be imposed, then obviously we have to be prepared for that. And therefore, we cannot afford to be complacent. So this is, if you like the discussion, do subscribe to the channel, send us your comments. Until our next episode, goodbye and stay safe.